about to see. Here are a couple of photos of the camp where we gathered, and we heard Libertad once again talk to us a little bit. We heard some of the members of the community also talk about the meaning of resistance, why they were there, why it was important to them. They gave us a sense of, let's see, hold on a second here, the challenges that they were up against. Kind of lost my.
This is a group that was up to the rising electricity costs.
Oh, okay.
Right. Right, but also protection of the beach community as a community. As you can see, this is a really beautiful place, but people are being pushed back. The amount of fish available for people to consume is diminishing. The other kinds of projects are crowding them. There was actually a building going up right next to us that had nothing to do with the community we were in. So they were flush up against other kinds of projects and really feeling the pinch. The feeling at this particular community was not very positive. Other people on Boca del Cielo, this community, what the things that we heard.
Well, I would say we've heard over and over, especially in the coast, is it's a very different region. You don't have the densely populated types of tighter knit indigenous communities like she was showing in the highlands, and people have found it very challenging to organize there, especially when people are very poor. And there's a tradition often of the Mexican government basically placating people and giving them things, or telling them that other people are trying to just, push them in another direction or trying to manipulate them. And so we saw this, and as well as in the communities I think they'll talk about after, that they've had a lot of challenges trying to organize their communities.
Right, right. On the issue of electricity, electricity is produced abundantly in Chiapas, but the people in the surrounding communities don't get the advantage of it. So there's this sense of, again, sort of falling further and further behind. Development is taking place, it's moving forward for others, but it's leaving the smaller communities, the poorer communities behind. So the right to electricity is the right to have heat and the right to have light and so forth, to be able to function in your own home.
What about ecotourism in this area? Sort of.
I don't think we heard as much about ecotourism.
We did hear that there were plans, and people are very anxious about it, that there's been all this talk about bringing tourism to this region, but not just like working with the communities, more like this idea of creating the Cancun of Chiapas, and people are very worried about that. But one of the things that the collective was doing there was trying to possibly recruit small groups to come, and they were selling things like honey and coffee, but it was incredibly small scale. I mean, I don't think maybe 3 of us tried to buy coffee, and that was what they had. So I think that's growing, but I think there's a lot of fear of them putting, resorts, and there's been talk about that, especially the building of the port that happened in that area, Puerto Chiapas.
Yeah, this is an incredibly beautiful place. The water was warm, it was inviting, it was quiet, the sand was clean and flat, and it was just absolutely gorgeous. It was kind of hot. The weather itself was warm but fairly moderate. The sand itself you couldn't walk on with your bare feet. But it was just a beautiful place, and you could see why there were designs on this area.
With the electricity, can I just say that was one thing that I thought was really positive, that they talked about resistance to paying the high cost of electricity that the whole community was paying on. Especially because it was affecting people on an individual and family level. And so they had this history of just not paying. And when the electric company was coming in to want to put in meters, they weren't having that either. But apparently there's that is what's coming down the road, and I forget how it's told me, but they're slowly starting to convert with those meters. And once the meters are in, then it gets cut off right at the source if you don't pay. Whereas that's not the case right now, and so they're able to have electricity and not pay the high cost because they don't have that kind of
We also got a tour of La Encrucijada Bioreserve, or the Crossroads Bioreserve. And here again you see, whoops. Golly. Yeah, this one again. I have movement in these ones that have notes and it just didn't come across. But you can see Elena here on the left, and we're getting a tour here of the bioreserve, including the mangroves. Mangroves are very interesting kind of tree. They grow to be maybe 90 feet. These are some of the tallest ones in the hemisphere. And they're part of a very complex ecosystem. They support all types of life in the land area as well as in the waters. There are jaguars and raccoons and birds and waterfowl who are all dependent on these mangroves. Many, many different species, maybe 50 or 60 different species of animals. The roots also feed nutrients into the waters. One of the difficulties is that these mangroves are being poisoned by runoff coming from the titanium mines and other mines in the area. So there's a lot of concern, not just about the mangroves, but about the whole ecosystem that is going to be affected. And of course, people who depend on these different forms of life for a living, fish and so forth. Anybody else on the mangroves? This was an especially
So
interesting.
they're naturally protected for the area being really prone to things like hurricanes.
Yes, right. They help prevent erosion. Right.
As we came back, we were treated as the cutest little rectangle.
Oh yeah, that's right. We did see a little signs of life in the forest.
It was very curious about us.
What I think it's important to note there is that you really can't get near the mines, and that was something, we asked about on the trip, because I know, Lynn has mentioned, on a previous trip being able to see that, and what we heard from our guide, with the boat is that, they're protected by, heavy security, and, there's been a few times where people have been able to sneak over there, and it's basically yellow. In the water, and they'll say they have a tailing, so they open them at night and release it into the river, and so there's a lot of heavy security around them. But you can see the effects that they were showing us how low the water was, or they were saying like people get fish out, the fish have no tails, all these really kind of disturbing things, and I'm sure you'll talk about health in that sector as well.
Yeah. After following this, we went to two communities where they were living downstream from the titanium mines. These mines, there's been a new round of structural reform in mining law that has liberalized the area so that there's been a surge of new concessions that have been doled out in Chiapas. Most of them, at least I'd say half of them, are titanium mines. Titanium is, it has a lot of different uses, actually. There's probably a lot of titanium in this room. It goes into cell phones and laptops. It's also used for medical purposes. It's used for surgical screws, artificial limbs, wheelchairs. It's used in architecture. It's used in art. But its demand has gone way up, and the Mexican government has decided to cash in on that, and that means more movement of mining investments in this region, and especially in Soconusco, which is the region pictured here on the map. We went from the northern Pacific coast, and we traveled down along that coast and into Soconusco, and we had the good fortune, thanks to our hosts in Otros Mundos, of meeting with people in communities that had been profoundly affected by the runoff from these mines, just becoming more aware of it in the last year and a half or so. These organizations have only just geared up, realizing that they are facing dire health effects, a tripling in the rate of cancer in less than 10 years, for instance. Rebecca mentioned the fish, depletion of the fish stock, deformities in the fish, all sorts of evidence that the water is tainted, is poisoned. Among the cancers, liver cancer was extremely common. They told us about how the people who were succumbing to it were young people in their 20s, and it being fatal for them. So these are some of the stories that we were able to hear in this region. And this is the other community, a neighboring community also in Sokonusko, where we were. So this is Escuintla. Oh yeah. Sorry, yeah, this one had movement in it as well, so I'll just.
Sorry, sometimes
That's all right.
source,
Yeah, no worries. We'll stay on this right now so that we can kind of talk a little bit more about. Thank you. Thanks. So that we can talk a little bit more about the experience of talking with people in these communities. Anybody else want to share some of the conversations that we had with the people there? One of the things that came up was we had to be very careful not identifying people, not taking notes that would identify their activities and the kinds of protests that they were carrying on. They said that they had had this experience with another group that had come from a university. They had taken careful notes, and those notes had been turned into the university that turned them into the administrators, who then turned them over to the police. And very soon after that, people received threatening calls. And they have experienced a variety of different kinds of threats and harassment for being involved. Some of the communities are divided. In some cases, they tell us that the people who are paid to go out and harass people if they paid by the mining companies themselves to intimidate people away from protesting, away from expressing their opposition to the mines. It's important to know also that these communities, most of these communities voted not to have mining in their communities because they were made well aware of what the possible consequences could be. And they're relying on that convention, the UN convention, which was signed by Mexico in 1995, that mandated that communities be consulted around these kinds of development issues. So they feel they have gone through the procedure and they have expressed their opposition, and now they are divided around whether or not to support the mining companies. Some people are willing to take the money for their land and then get out and leave others behind to deal with the consequences.
Is the land private or communal?
I am not sure about that.
Anybody has to do with a lot of the preparations for NAFTA, so there's often a mix. I remember some of these communities today had said yes at the beginning, and then said no, because again, they weren't really made aware of what the risks were, as well as, the mine companies made a lot of promises to people. They built roads, they built schools, and none of that ever happened. But Mexico, I think it was in 1992, reformed the ejido law that Lynn was talking about with ejidos, which ended the ability of communities to petition for ejido land in the state, as well as allowed ejido land to be privatized, titled, and sold. And so again, that made it easier for people who were offered something to sell it, whereas previously you could not sell that land. And so I think, I'm not quite sure these communities, but it seems like a mix of things going on. But again, part of that goal was to make it easier to sell land.
Right, and that's a very divisive strategy, because some people, if you can get $10,000 or $20,000 for a plot of land, people will take that, seeing that maybe there isn't a future in that community anyway, or that it's going downhill, and then it divides up the communities. So the land is slowly absorbed by the mines themselves, but a lot of people resist, knowing that there aren't that many other options for them.
And it's, as I remember, land's a short-term gain for people who do sell their land. They get 10 or 20,000 and they spend it, and then they've got it. And now they have to move to the city and work in town as
They need to feed their
opposed to being,
kids. They need to feed
a
their
farming
kids,
community forever and ever.
Right. And if they're,
They need to feed their kids. Somebody's sitting there, it's not like they don't care about the land, but it's called survival, in whatever way they can. Yeah, I'm sure it causes conflict.
right.
One thing I was struck by was I asked them.
Please stand up. Thank you.
Just stay standing.
Like me.
There were about 10, people that kept watch over this blockade. They're blocking the road going up to the mines. And so they're keeping a day and night watch on this road, presumably, to not allow the mining, because they stopped for some time, right? And so they don't want them to go back in there. And 10 people is what I remember hearing, and I thought, how are they doing that? But it makes me think of, those 10 people come probably from 10 families, typically, and they support each other. And I was just really impressed with their commitment that no matter what, they were staying put until they knew that their community was going to be safe. They were hoping to draw in more support from the community, but were aware that that was challenging, and that not everybody was felt compelled to join the cause at that time. But they were holding the fort in effect for the whole community, and I'm sure were supported by their families. We were fed while we were there, so they had like a makeshift little kitchen fire thing, and they were really committed to the cause. And 10 people, oh my God.
Yeah, it was another experience that was really very moving. Sit right there. Okay. Yeah.
Also, to put it in temporal context for while we were there, we visited these two communities like on the eve of when the Army Corps of Engineers decided to get out of Standing Rock. So they were both drawing support like from us, and we were drawing support from them. Like I think it meant a lot that we had come at all. Like if you're just 10 people kind of blocking the road, what are you supposed to make of like you against the power that seeks to destroy you? So yeah, it was like both like moving and also really depressing. I would say.
Yeah, in many ways, like overwhelming to see what people are up against.
I think this community drew strength from the neighboring community. That was my sense, at least. There wasn't a sense of despair that I had from these people.
Right.
It was very different from that coastal
Right.
community that we visited.
I thought so
There was
too.
like 3 or 4 people, and they just were struggling, and it felt very apparent that these folks had a strong message. And
Being able to focus on the mines, I think, is advantageous. When you have a broader agenda, it's harder to get unity. The narrower, the more specific the issue, the easier it is to get a sense of unity and direction and energy behind it. And I think that was the advantage that the second two communities had. Anything else? Okay. You won't get to see Akakoya. This is, I think, Rebecca, you took this, right? One of your photos, because I thought it was a nice juxtaposition of the two lakes that we saw. This is another bioreserve. It's the Lagunas de Montebello or Montebello, and it's about an hour from Comitán. And it is, I think it is the first national park that was ever established in Chiapas in 1958. And it was designated as a protected biosphere reserve by UNESCO. There are 59 lakes in the area, and they're very famous for their striking colors. You can see especially the one below here is one of some of the healthy lakes that remain. That come in like a crystal blue and deep blue and different shades of green. Some were even red and it had purple hues. But the one at the top is a dead lake. This is one that has been polluted endlessly by large-scale agrochemical farming. And the runoff has gone into the lake. And of course the water can't be consumed. I believe they said it was a tomato production where they were using a lot of chemical inputs, and this was the rather depressing result. Other things, other ideas that we heard when we were taken on the tour of the lakes, the lake region. There was a clean drinking water reservoir nearby also. And it was a nice place to pass through. It was actually beautiful and again, really very tragic to see the consequences.
Isn't this what we set down at the shoreline and the gentleman was giving his
Right.
talk to us? That
Right.
was just incredible.
Right, right.
Just the beauty of it and the informality of it and how he was speaking to us.
Right, right. So in addition to runoff from the mines, from titanium and other mineral mines, there's also the problem of large-scale agriculture that is very dependent on chemical inputs, fertilizers, pesticides, that are constantly being plowed into the production process so that they can gain more and more of a yield with each season. There's an endless drive for the earning of foreign exchange. These products, the products from the mines, the products from commercial agriculture are designated for foreign markets. And that's where you earn the exchange that you need. That's where you get the real value. Local production for local consumption is something that is falling by the wayside, that has not received the kind of support from Mexico, the Mexican government, or from any other governments in Latin America. Instead, the neoliberal model pushes production in the direction of exports, especially exports to countries that have wealthy consumer populations. The United States especially, Europe, Canada obviously, some of it also over time going increasingly to places like China that are newer developing countries. But this means more and more encountering of these kinds of contaminants in places like Chiapas.
And as I remember then, the profanity of some of that was many of these chemicals have been outlawed in the US.
Right.
But these agrochemical companies dump them at cheap prices to encourage them to get hooked.
Right, and they facilitate rapid production and greater production, and we eat tomatoes. So we have a lot of reasons to be thinking about how these things ultimately affect us. Our cancer rates, for instance, are pretty high as well. Anything else on the lakes? So that was a bit on our tour of environmental factors.
I was just gonna add that I think what really also struck out was a lack of transparency. Sometimes we ask, who owns that mine or who is it, and people wouldn't necessarily know, which was really interesting. There was almost no transparency, and a lot of organizations like Otros Mundos, the Frente de Resistencia, are in these kind of dialogues now with the government, but every time there's kind of been, an assessment by, I forget what ministry it is, it's supposed to be in charge, and they're basically working in collaboration with the mining companies. So it's quite clear to everyone that, that whole process was so far. They're in those processes, but they didn't have confidence.
Yeah, this raises the questions that were begged previously that I was going to ask about at the end, but I think now's the time. You referred to the loss of ejidos and the purchase of communal property by private investors, talked about local communities being pushed away from the beach area and kind of a sense of disorganization and loss and depression there. Development going up next door, or a building going up next door that had nothing to do with the local community. In Escuintla, the titanium mines, problems with the runoff, and the intersection of government concessions that are sold to private businesses, and then agrochemicals and large-scale agriculture, production of tomatoes. And at each point, I want to say, okay, we're using the passive voice here. Who's actually doing what to whom? Not this is being done by somebody, right? Who's doing what to whom and why? And I think if we would go in deep, where are the tomatoes produced? Who are they sold to? Are they imported to the United States? What's what places are they sold at? Are they being sold at this supermarket here, that one there? What I'm getting at is that as much as this is fascinating and interesting, that solidarity with these communities really puts on us the burden, if not the duty, to find out what the connection is with us. Who owns these mines? I'm willing to make some bets. Who owns the lenders that make the loans to the people, the hedge funds, or whoever are buying this property or exploiting this property? Who are the agrochemical producers that are dumping this stuff on the market? So if you can make that connection, even though it sometimes requires additional research, I think it will make the relationship with these communities all that more substantial by creating bonds, basically not just of sympathy, but of struggle, because these are the same enemies all over the world, and they're right here at home. So, questions begged.
I think most of the companies were Canadian and Chinese, I believe, but there's definitely US interested in those companies.
Well, yeah, we need to name the names, okay? That's all I'm saying.
There were names.
We gotta name the names.
Grupo Mexico is one. Grupo Mexico, it's actually a Mexican company. Grupo Mexico or Group Mexico, is one of the most prevalent mines in the area. Great fortunes are being made. I think Carlos Slim has most of the mines, or has interest in many of the mines in the north, but there are other billionaires who are doing very well by these mines. In Mexico, the U.S., when I looked into it, the U.S. Actually has a smaller role than you might think. China, definitely. China has involvements, and Canada has involvements. The Canadians typically are very subtle. They are junior partner organizations to Mexican companies. So they're not as visible, with a few exceptions like Barrick and Goldcorp. The Chinese are a little more obvious. They're not transparent. They're less transparent than either Canadian or US companies. They're very prevalent also in Mexican mining. So there is some information out there about who the companies are themselves and how they operate. But some of the greatest fortunes in the world are being made through mining.
That'd be a great follow-up for students. You'd be doing research on that, identify them and organizing campaigns.
I believe Evelyn was doing that. I think she was looking on like the Secretary of Economia, one of the students. And actually two of them are in my development class now. Both are going to be doing final papers related to extraction of javelins and perhaps comparing it elsewhere. But I know Evelyn was interested in looking through the companies.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of good projects coming out of this. We want to contact the media. We want to get radio interviews. We want to do presentations. We have one scheduled at Corbell. And we have a photo exhibit coming up. So we are going to do our outreach, and we are going to keep building our stock of information. So are we at closing time?
No, we can continue the conversation. Usually we try to finish at 8:30.
Yeah.
But I think there's like a lot of interest in continuing the talk. I'm gonna turn on the light, which is gonna affect the picture. Sure.
I wanted to close with this one, and I'm going to ask Lorena, because I know this was an especially moving experience for you. If you don't mind talking about the Comitán archaeological site and the Maya religious ceremony, a few words. Sure. This is most of us at the top of one of the religious sites at the archaeological.
You can't really see how tall it is from
Yeah,
that
it was
particular
Cool
picture.
story.
But it's not just,
Yeah.
it was quite a hike.
It was a challenge getting up there. And share whatever else.
We don't have much time, but you covered most of it, so I'll just share a little bit. And thank you for including all of us. So here we met with a healer, right, a spiritual guide, indigenous woman who met with us, and she did a little ceremony with us, which was really lovely. There were a few things happening in the group. Somebody had a death, right, of a
There
friend.
was a death.
There was a death. There was your
People
mother,
with
right?
accident.
There were a
Family
number of
members
things.
with
Yeah.
health
And-
issues, yeah.
Yeah, and then Standing Rock, we had just found out that the Army Corps of Engineers had declared that they were going to be stopping the work at DAPL. So we were excited about that, and then so those other more serious things were going on, and so we wanted to take that time to kind of meet and be in community and do a little ceremony and connect to each other and to the earth. And so before we even went into the park, the spiritual guide that we were with did a little ceremony for each of us that wanted to do that, a little cleanse with incense. That was really nice. And then we sat in this circle at the top of one of these ruins, and each of us shared, and I think she said some special words, offered a prayer to the ancestors. That was really nice, and it was just a lovely, moving moment. I think that a lot of us thought it was very special and a way to connect to each other again and to the land. So I think that was a good ending. I wanted to talk about the lakes again and just say that those two lakes are right next to each other. It was really fascinating to see the stark difference between an alive lake that's beautiful, clear water you can see through, and this other one that's clearly dead. And they were, I don't know how many feet away from each other, but very short walk of maybe 100 feet or something. It was very short. And so that was striking. And then when we sat by the dead lake, and the gentleman who was giving us the talk was talking about the work of his organization and what they were doing to help prevent further destruction like this. They do little workshops with local farmers to teach them old ways of farming, organic farming, that kind of thing, because they become dependent on these agrochemicals. They do grow faster. They're able to make more money from that, I imagine. And so, that's what they're doing now, and this is the end result. But again, as somebody mentioned, out of necessity, right? They're not wanting to harm the land. They're very much connected with the land in a way that we're not, I think. But that's the way of the world now, and so they're having to learn the old methods of organic farming in some of these communities again, and so that's the work of this one nonprofit. And then I wanted to come to the point that the gentleman was talking about, kind of our interconnectedness. That's what came to mind, and something I've been thinking about since this trip is how we are all interconnected. Why should we care about the struggles in Chiapas? It's great that so many people came out and heard this talk. I'm sure many others probably wouldn't have come because it's not in their backyard, and it's easy to check out. There's enough bad news already right here at home, and so many wars and whatnot, that it's easy not to pay attention. But we are interconnected, and the health of the planet, the health of each other, the health of animals that we share this earth with, our ecosystem, it's all one. And so the health that's happening, the devastating health effects, the cancer rates, that it's astonishing that these communities don't have access to their own health records. They know that their high cancer rates are through the roof, unprecedented for their healthy communities. And so they've had to do things like steal records, steal what should be public records, and they've done that because they want proof to be able to do something with that. And they shared some of those records with us. And we will do what we can to disseminate that information. And I think the reason we are here and sharing this information with you is because every community that we visited told us the same thing. Please share our stories, spread the word. And we've really taken that to heart. We weren't there as tourists. We were there to learn from these folks and to do something to support their struggle. And again, that interconnectedness, it's our struggle as well. We're eating these horrible chemical vegetables, as Lynn was saying, and that's just on one level. The mangroves, those are a valuable ecosystem for our planet. They clean the waters. They're our lungs for this area of the world. That will affect us. That will inevitably impact us if these areas are devastated. And then on a spiritual level, like we're all humans, and we really need to get to know these devastating struggles that are happening and how they're impacting not only those communities, but wealth of knowledge and connection to the land and collectivism and old ways of life that are so valuable, so important, are being lost to greed, to capitalism, to colonialism. And so I say we need to reclaim those valuable ways of life. We need to have more connection with the land, with each other, and do something to learn from these communities as well. We were there not just to learn about their struggles, but I was really inspired to learn about the things that they're doing right, that are working. These are collectivist cultures that are in struggle, and they're small groups, but they are mighty groups. And it's an example to us of what we can do. Standing Rock is now a shining beacon, I think, for movements around the world. And I was humbled to see how these much smaller movements still have that same kind of spirit, that heart that says, no matter what, we're going to stand up and we're going to fight. And so Lynn and I and Amy and another student are going to be presenting at a conference, hopefully. We've submitted a proposal to the Rocky Mountain Latin American something remittance.
Rocky Mountain Council of Latin American
Yeah.
Studies in Utah and Salt Lake City in April. So we'll be pulling our
Talking
material
about this.
together, and hopefully down the line we'll have something that you all can read. We have lots of projects coming out of this. People who are going to be writing for our blog, the DJPC blog, so watch that space. We'll get to hear and see more. There may be more photos also that we'd like to get up. But we're going to go forward with all the ideas that we can muster and all the energy that we can muster to do, as Lorena said, share these stories, get the word out, and do what we can to point out human rights abuses in these areas, because these people are facing danger just by standing up and declaring that they're against this kind of development. So we want to figure out as many different ways as we can for being part of their movement that they have generated. So we take ideas, we'll take in anything that you care to share. Rebecca?
I was just going to add, and I'll share for the group as well, that Oak was also just sharing me maps, and they also share for the group. Some are available online, some are a lot harder to find, but there are maps of where these different kind of mining concessions are, where these other related development projects, especially hydropower, which is going on down there, and kind of the way that they're constructing these development corridors. As Lynn mentioned, when they changed the project's name, they didn't stop it, they tried to keep it quiet. And I think having access to these maps really shows what's happening, as well as they're showing where there's been human rights abuses, where there's been military bases built, and how clearly that's mapping on to these resource-rich areas and concessions. So I think that will be very valuable in showing that, when I think otherwise the government tries to deny it's doing this, and there's a lot of lack of transparency.
Well, I don't want to close the conversation. There has been a series of comments and from Lynn and Lorena and the audience about solidarity and what we were there for and what we learned. And Lorena said exactly the words that we were told. Just, we don't want anything. We just want you to tell what you saw here. So this is the first one of a series of talks and outputs or results from our visit. Along the year, you're going to see some results of that. We would like to do this experience again with other people. It was a great experience to have a variety of characters and ages in a group of 15 in the bus. So really, we learned a lot from each other and from the people that are living those struggles. And it is our responsibility, as we say, to name those agencies, companies that are abusing human rights in Latin America, and we have the power to do that here. So I'm very happy that this room is full today and that each one of you is going to help us take those stories and share those stories. Some of it is on our website, some of it is on our Facebook, those pictures, those maps. You can find them on our Facebook page, because as we were going around on the trip, I was trying to keep you informed of what was going on, but we are trying to use the new technology that's available to let you know what we're doing, as well as having these spaces, community spaces, to share what we are learning from those communities in resistance. So I don't want to close the conversation. We can stay here as long as we want, and I'm sure you have more questions. There's a group of amazing students here that I'm sure you can talk to them, and Amy spoke a little bit, but I think the other ones are being a little bit shy. They're not that shy. I can testify to that. So please gather around the room and continue this conversation. We are having our annual retreat on the 28th. I would love to see you here and exchange ideas of how we can move our work forward in the next few years and decades to come. Also, there will be another presentation on February the 12th at the 10:30 Catholic Community. I'll be sending information about that. And the conference, there are several other outputs that are going to come out of this trip. But also, DJPC you are DJPC. You make what we want to be doing in the community. Our role is facilitators. I'm here. You have given me the task to be the director, but I am the facilitator of the communication and bringing you what is happening out there. But you are the ones, collectively, we will be doing the change. So thank you very much for being here. Please stay and exchange. And we will see you next Saturday, hopefully. And on Saturday at the Women's March. So the room is open. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's all right. Oh, yeah. It's so great to see you. Yeah. Good for you. All right. Thanks for helping me with bringing out the memories.
I was getting quiet while you were speaking, so that's why I thought you were. It's a symbiosis.